I have 4 pillows that came with my couch and love seat. I love the idea of putting seasonal pillows out, but here's the thing. I don't have space in my house to store a bunch of seasonal pillows, nor do I want to spend the money for them. So my solution for my problem is to make seasonal pillow covers for my couch pillows. On one side of this pillow cover you have the witch's feet, and you flip it around and there is a jack-o'-lantern print that is also cute. The back is an envelope style, and I think I showed you there in the middle that I could add a buttonhole and a button to that to keep it together better, and that would also add to the style of the pillow. So I'm going to show you how to make this witch's feet pillow cover for your couch pillows, or you can make it into a regular pillow, or you can also make a wall hanging out of it. Whatever you'd like to do, it's up to you. You can find the printable pattern for this project at a website called favecrafts.com and search witch legs pillow once you get into that website. I'll leave the link to that in the description box. They did the project using felt and just a few colors, and so it looks totally different than the project that I've done. This is the first one of these that I ever made, and I made it into a wall hanging. You can see that at the top of the wall hanging that I just stopped with the legs, and so they're kind of just 2 legs just floating in the middle of this background fabric. So for the wall hangings that I made afterwards, I continued the legs through to the binding. I did notice that the picture of the project on the website, it's done the way I have it done here. This is the back, and as you can see, the quilting went through to the back. I've got a safety pin there as a hanger. I used batting for this, but in making a pillow, I'm not going to use batting, and it's not going to be quilted. For this project, I like to use a black and white background fabric. I like this fat quarter because of the leaves and the acorns on it. It's 18 by 21 inches, and so it's just barely going to be big enough for our pillow cover. For the striped socks, the boots, and the buckles, I'm going to be using scraps that I have in gold, orange, black, pumpkin print, and lilac. Also some green and black for the boots that I don't have pictured. This is the fabric that I've chosen for the back of my pillow. I have pre-washed both the background fabric and the backing, and I've ironed the backing as well. When I made this project before, a couple of years ago, I made patterns out of file folders, or you could use heavy cardstock. And I made patterns out of the boot and the sock and the buckle to the boot. If you were just doing one of these, you wouldn't need to make a pattern. Just slip the printed pattern underneath the Wonder Under or the fusible web to trace it. The pattern has a heavy enough line that it's really easy to trace it through the fusible web. And the pattern is free. I don't think I mentioned that before. When I made my pattern out of cardstock, I made different stripes for the socks. And so you wouldn't have to have as many or as skinny as I did it. That's just how I chose to do it. When I made the pattern, I labeled it 1, 2, 3, and then I also put an R or an L on either side, indicating whether it was the right or the left leg of the witch's feet. Trace the pattern onto the smooth side of the fusible web. Be sure to flip the pattern over to the other side when you do the second tracing, so that you have a left and a right leg and foot, and not two right feet or two left feet. I want to note that I made the witch's legs longer than the pattern shows, so you can add to them if you'd like. I traced the patterns fairly close together to get the most out of the product that I had, but you need to be sure to have enough space to cut in between them, because you're going to cut it out before you iron it onto your fabric. So I have a left leg and a right leg now, as well as a left foot and a right foot. And I labeled the stripes to the right leg accordingly. I cut the pieces out to get ready to iron them onto the fabric. And for this I used scissors that I only use on paper. However, when the pieces were fused to fabric and still had the paper on them, I used my fabric scissors. And I hope I didn't ruin them too much. When I'm ready to iron the fusible web onto the fabric, I'm careful to make sure that the wrong side of the fabric is facing up and that the bumpy side of the fusible web is facing down, paper side up. I'm using a very hot iron on the highest setting without steam. I set the iron on the pattern piece for 10 seconds, or I just count to 10, and that's long enough to adhere the pattern piece to the fabric. Be careful because it's very hot, and if the glue gets on you, it will burn you. I didn't know which gold fabric would look best as the buckles for the shoes, so I was looking at both of them. The fusible web will stick to the ironing board if you have it hang over and you iron it, so be careful. I'm using mostly scrap pieces that I have for the stripes on the socks. On this light purple fabric that I have, the pattern would not fit on the straight of grain, and so I turned it diagonally and put it on the bias. Normally I wouldn't do that, but I figured it's not going to be pulled or messed with, so it should be just fine. I continue with ironing on the pattern pieces onto the stripes for the socks. I trimmed the background fabric to be 18 by 18.5 inches. I cut out the shoes, the buckles, and the stripes to the socks, and now they're ready to iron onto the background fabric. You just peel the paper off the back of the cutout, and I'm just going to lay everything out on the background piece to center, make sure everything's centered and looking right. When I lay the stripes down, I am going to insert them underneath, first underneath the boot piece, and then as I add layers of stripes, I am just going to insert the second piece slightly under the first piece, and so on, so that I have 2 pieces of fabric to top stitch when I go to the sewing machine. Since this is going to be a pillow cover, I want it to be a little more sturdy if I need to wash it, so I am going to top stitch everything down. If you are just making a wall hanging, you wouldn't have to top stitch everything. You could just iron on the pieces with the wonder under, add batting, backing, and a binding, and be done. When I put it on the ironing board in this direction, it's too big. So I'm just going to do half of the pieces, lay half of the pieces out, iron them, and then do the other half. So that the orange with polka dot fabric can overlap the next piece, I'm going to be very careful and not iron it all the way to the top. And then I'll just be able to slip the green piece into that when I'm ready to move on. And voila, it's now ready to be top stitched. If you prefer to make a wall hanging instead of a pillow cover, then now you'll need to cut out some fabric for the back and some batting for the middle, and then place your witch's feet top on top. Pin them together securely with safety pins. For a wall hanging, you can just leave it the way it is. If you want to do the quilting on it, you can do as little or as much as you want, but I'll be showing how to do that in a few seconds. Then you'll need to bind your wall hanging, and you can do that one of two ways. The first way is you can make a binding and stitch that to the front and then pull it over to the back and stitch it down. The second way would be to cut your backing fabric a little larger than your front and your batting and pull the excess over to the front. Fold it under once and then either hand sew it or machine stitch it down. If you want to quilt your wall hanging, then continue on with the next instructions as for the pillow cover. I start on the first overlapping piece of the sock, which is the orange pumpkin fabric. And I apologize, my camera gets a little bouncy at times during this. I tack it down at the beginning and stitch it very close to the edge, and then tack it down at the end. And then on to the next piece, which is the black and white swirly fabric. I'm using black thread and just going to top stitch all of these pieces down so that they don't come apart. What I should have done but didn't do is go straight across after I finished with the left leg. Then I should have tacked it down and pulled the thread across to the right leg on the same piece of fabric and tacked it down and stitched that piece as well, instead of just doing one leg at a time. I could have done both. After I stitched on the stripes horizontally, I then moved to the shoe buckle, stitching the outer part of the rectangle and then moving to the inner part. I then began stitching the legs vertically, going down the legs and then around the boot, The boot was a little tricky for me with all of its twists and turns, but with black thread on a black piece of fabric, you really can't see mistakes. If you wanted to use a zigzag stitch instead of a straight stitch, that would look really cute on this. Or if you have a blanket stitch on your sewing machine, that would be a nice idea as well, although I think that that could be a little tricky going around the boot. I noticed on the picture of the project that was on favecrafts of the same project that they used a blanket stitch, just on the legs vertically and possibly the buckles. When you get around that obnoxious tight circle at the toe of the boot, then get to the point and pivot your needle, turn your fabric around, and then go the opposite direction. I don't know if you could tell, but the fusible web had pulled apart from the background fabric at this part of the boot. But I kept on sewing and was able to sew it down without any puckers. And at last, straight sewing again. So on the right leg, or the right foot, I had problems doing the curvy part of the boot. I was kind of okay until I got to the point and then had to navigate that tight circle again. And so you can see that I just didn't quite do it. So I picked out some of the stitching and then decided, instead of getting upset, to approach it from the other angle or the other side. So here I am approaching it from the other side, and I still didn't quite get it right, but I decided to call it close enough. Now, some of you may think that that's unacceptable and that it needs to be perfect, but I'm okay with my decision. And no one but me and the 3 people that watch this video will ever know that I messed up at that particular point. I've never claimed to be an expert seamstress. My main goal is trying to show people that they can still do something even if they're not expert in sewing. From the back side, that left boot looks a bit rough as well. But on the right side, well, which is our left now, I don't think it looks that bad. But that's just me. You'll do much better than I did. Now I'm getting the backing fabric out to measure and cut for the envelope part of the pillow. Since it's an envelope style pillow, I'll need to cut 2 pieces for the back. I trimmed up the rough edge. So this is where things got a bit dicey, and I messed up, but I fixed it, so it's okay. The width needed to be the same dimension or the same measurement as the top piece, which was 18.5 inches. But the length was where I got into trouble. I messed up on the math by measuring the back length and dividing it by 2. Then adding 3 inches to each piece for the fold over gave me 12 inches, which means that there was no overlap. It just totally met, the 2 pieces just totally met each other in the middle. So to save myself from having to cut 2 new pieces, I instead did a 2-inch fold over, and that gave me a couple of inches overlap. So I went back and measured a pillow cover that I had done before for the same couch pillows, and for those I had measured and cut 2 14-inch lengths for the back, which allowed me to fold under 3 inches and have a 1/4 inch seam allowance and a 3.5-inch overlap of both pieces. I just got mixed up and turned around for some reason. I fold both pieces over 2 inches. Then stitch them both down on the sewing machine. Now I lay the top on the bottom with the right side up, putting the back pieces on top of the applique top piece, right sides facing each other, and then the back pieces overlapping each other. It ended up only overlapping 2 inches, but it turned out fine. I'm now pinning the 2 pieces together on all 4 sides to keep it stable. So in the description box will be a link to a video showing you how to make an envelope pillow the proper way. My pillow measures 17 inches by 17 inches. I stitched around the pillow using a 1/4 inch seam. But when I tried it on the pillow, it was a little bit big and loose. So I went back over and took a little bit more in on the seams. You basically just need to allow for a 1/2 inch more than the measurement of your pillow for the seam allowances. If you want a little looser fit, then allow for a 1/4 inch more onto the 1/2 inch for the seam allowance. Now comes the moment of truth. So there you have the witch's feet pillow cover. I didn't like how loose it was in the back, and so I went ahead and made 3 buttonholes with 3 buttons to secure it better. And I like the look of the end results, although it wasn't without a few mistakes. And you'll see what I mean by that at the end of the video. But it's not anything devastating or anything that can't be hidden. If you can relate to making silly mistakes while sewing, leave a thumbs up. And if you can't, well, then I'm impressed. This is a fun project to add some Halloween color to your home, and I hope you'll try it. The link to favecrafts.com will be in the description box, where you can find the free printable pattern and just search under Witch Legs Pillow. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.